What is up, guys? Morton here from SteamFirst.com with a review for the 2.5D indie platformer Spate, developed by AO Games and released March 27th, 2014 on Steam for $10. Spate is an interesting game. It reminds me a lot of Limbo and of American McGee's Alice, but at the same time it's very unique. You play as Timothy Bluth, a detective, and you're investigating the disappearance of a wealthy businessman. The story is quite dark, which is perfect for the setting and the atmosphere of the game. Detective Bluth is an alcoholic whose daughter died and wife left him years ago, and you're wandering through the X Zone, which is a nightmarish place, and it's impossible to tell what's real and what you're hallucinating from the alcohol. The dialogue between characters is good, but whenever the detective is giving narration about anything, he has to mention multiple times about his alcoholism. Things are happening because of the drink, he's sad because of the drink, he's happy because of the drink. It was the only part of the story I didn't like. He's just really obnoxious. But that was a relatively small complaint, all things considered. The story gets a 4.5 out of 5. It was perfect for the game. The dialogue between characters was clever, had some funny moments mixed in with the dark atmosphere. There were plenty of twists and turns to keep things interesting and the story engaging. And if only the gameplay was as interesting, we'd be in business. The gameplay isn't particularly hard. In fact, I'd honestly say it isn't hard at all. There's only a couple of times where you might die, but if you're paying attention, it's entirely possible to complete the game without dying at all, even on the first playthrough. That isn't bad though. The game overall is more about story and atmosphere than actual gameplay. There are some segments though that can be up to 5 minutes where you literally just hold right. There are no obstacles, and even though I know it's to add atmosphere to the game, it can get kind of boring to just sit there not actually doing anything. The controls are solid though, and there's a couple of fun things you do to change things up if you want. You can take a drink of alcohol and the screen gets all colorful and you can jump super high. I don't really understand how alcohol makes that possible, but that's okay. You never really need to use that for anything, but it can be used to get around a few obstacles if you want to. The gameplay gets a 3.5 out of 5. It's fun and good for the most part, but it can get boring when you can go minutes without there being anything to do other than holding the right arrow. What the game lacks in gameplay, it makes up in sound and visuals. The sounds in this game are all excellent. The narrator did a great job, although that is the only voice acting in the game. All the other conversations with characters are done through text. But the narration is just the peak of the iceberg. The rain, the wind, all of the sound effects for everything are outstanding, and it just adds so much to the overall atmosphere of the game. They did a great job really drawing you in and making you feel like the world they've created is real. Sound gets a 5 out of 5. There's really nothing I can complain about, and I tried hard to find something. But it's really just so good. The soundtrack, the sound effects, everything is great. Visually, the game is awesome as well. They did a fantastic job really creating this horrible place, and showing just how bad it is to be there. The lighting, the camera angles, the graphical design, everything is really well done. The only odd part is some of the animations, particularly when you slide down the side of a hill or something. The movements are very odd, but that's a relatively small complaint when everything else looks so good. The graphics get a 4.5 out of 5. They're not as flawless as the sound, but they're still excellent and add a lot to the game. The only thing this game is lacking in is value, which is hard to say because the game itself is really good, but it's still a $10 game and it's only about an hour and a half long. On top of that, there's no replayability. There are no achievements, and it's completely linear. They say on the Steam page that there's alternate endings, and there are, but you can basically guess what happens anyway, and I really don't think it's worth spending another hour and a half completing this game just to see a different 2-minute ending, especially with how easy the game is. If you've already completed it once, it'll probably be really boring to play through a second time, since you already know the story and the gameplay itself isn't very exciting. Overall, Spate gets a 4 out of 5. It's a well-paced, atmospheric 2.5D platformer with a very interesting story, awesome visuals, and amazing sound effects. The gameplay itself is slow-paced and not very exciting, but it's very fitting for the game. If the gameplay had been more intense, it would have taken away from the atmosphere they were creating. If you're looking for something story-driven, Spate is definitely worth a look, but if you're looking for something fast-paced and action-oriented, you'll probably want to look elsewhere.